Well, and that, one of the most profound paragraphs in the book is where you really cop to the fact that, I mean, you were a big believer, as it was bipartisan,
Yeah,
in engaging with China because it would lead to liberalization. That's what history had taught us, or so we believe. And the skeptics at the time seemed kind of like cranks. Now, you describe yourself as
right.
but you acknowledge that essentially you were wrong and they were right. Where was the blind spot?
Well, great question. I mean, for decades, 4 decades, throughout Deng Xiaoping, Hu Jintao, Deng Zemin, I'd say for 3 decades, we saw a pattern where the Chinese began developing internet access. That was a big thing. We all thought the internet access was going to open China up to all sorts of different influences. We thought the middle class would demand political rights. It just seems logical to us that economic modernization meant wealth, meant we stand up for our rights. They allowed lawyers to develop, to defend dissidents. They allowed labor unions to have strikes. They allowed foreign NGOs to go in to work with women, work on environmental causes. And so it was called the peaceful evolution theory, that over time, we didn't know quite how China would evolve. No one knew, but they would peacefully solve the problem of how do they make a transition from complete communist control, complete totalitarian control, to a model, their own model, right? We thought that these values that we were representing were international values. And so that we saw it in Japan, in Taiwan, in South Korea. We saw other places where I traveled. We saw that there seemed to be a connection between modernization, political liberalization, a softening of authoritarian rule. We all thought that, we all believed in that. And it's only been Xi Jinping in the last 6 or 7 years, starting really he took power in 2012, 2013. The nature of his power really became evident in 2015, I'll say. We did an OPC China Hands reunion that resulted in one of the earliest insights into how they were moving backwards. They were no longer moving in the direction we all expected. So Xi Jinping surprised the world. He was a communist, an authoritarian communist of a sort we had never seen.
I want to pause you there, because would you really call Xi a communist?
Absolutely. I mean, you could argue that he's a Leninist or a Stalinist, but he believes that all power flows through him personally. He has installed a Xi Jinping thought. If you disagree with me, I'm going to put you in the gulag, right? And so he has established the Communist Party. He has reinserted the Communist Party into control of every private sector company. The private sector was blossoming. Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, all these companies were blossoming. And in just the last few months, we can see that Jack Ma has been punished at Alibaba, and that most recently Didi has been punished for having an IPO. He is reimposing absolute communist control over the so-called private sector in China.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing on earth I am is a communist apologist, but I do think, I guess, he's a dictator and authoritarian.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's any ideology other than power that I can see. But I want to get to a lot of the things you just touched on. One, the recent turns, the way that technology unwittingly did not lead to liberalization, and the internet in particular, U.S. trade policy. But because you touched on it explicitly, why do you think everyone in the U.S. or most observers underestimated Xi and thought that he would be sort of someone who continued to support liberalization and closer ties with America and the international community?
Well, that's a mouthful. So the technology, they started building the Great Firewall. In fact, our companies helped build it. Cisco Systems helped build this great firewall that the Chinese government insisted on. So at first it didn't seem like it would be completely like the Great Wall of China. We didn't think it would be as impervious as it has developed. But basically, they've developed a form of censorship that they can control all the information that goes in to China. Very few Western news organizations are able to disseminate their information there. And the ones who do are very careful to toe the line, to only communicate financial information or certain information that doesn't violate the Chinese Communist Party's edicts. So the party has astutely turned the internet into a tool of control, into a tool to looking into people's lives. Okay, you can say big tech here has done much the same, and okay, they have, but it's not our government that knows when we're waking, when we're breathing, when we're walking, when we're not walking. It knows our retinal scans. They have turned the internet into a massive tool of the WeChat function, for example, means that they know everything that you buy in China. They know everything you post on social media, and you get points. You get a social media rating, like we have credit ratings here, right? There you get a rating on your citizenship. Are you a true believer or not? So they've turned the internet into a tool that we just never imagined that it could be turned into that. Xi Jinping emerged from a power struggle within the Communist Party, and we were not sufficiently sophisticated to understand who he really was. I remember Hank Paulson, former Goldman Sachs, former Treasury Secretary, the minute he took power, Hank Paulson ran around saying, oh, he's a liberalizer. He's going to open up the financial markets. Oh, he's been to Iowa. He spent a semester or however long it was in Iowa. So we got it profoundly wrong. I mean, our China watching establishment got it profoundly wrong. We had no idea who this man was. He suffered during the Cultural Revolution. He went down to the countryside. His father suffered, but it turns out he was a true believer. He was a true believer, not so much in Mao, but as my erudite friends point out, he was a true believer in Lenin and Stalin. Those are his true models. He believes in the great man, the theory of governance. And so he would share the Chinese criticism of Gorbachev and the other Soviet leaders for not being men enough to stand up and beat down the opponents. So it's been very surprising. He surprised everyone.
Well, I think it's just one, notch one more mistake to the establishment opinion when it comes to great changes in geopolitics.
Right.